What's up, everybody? It's your boy Jacob Hunter, to be exact, and we back with another episode 3 of Jake Sports Take. Today we doing a college football roundup. We talking the AP Top 25 poll. Week 5 has been released. We talking marquee matchups for this Saturday upcoming and much more. So without further ado, let's get to it. So as you can see, the AP poll for Week 5 is up. It's obviously consists of 25 teams, but for this sake, it's only the top 10 teams. I'm just going to go through each team and talk a little bit about them, and then we'll move on to the marquee matchups for the weekend. But Georgia, number 1. Obviously, Kirby Smart has those guys ready to play every week. But this past week, they struggled with Kent State, as some teams of that caliber usually do. They play down their competition, so I'm not too worried about Georgia, but pretty good team led by the mailman at quarterback. Pretty good defense, NFL guys across the board, so Georgia's pretty good. Alabama struggled with Texas a couple weeks ago, but since then have kind of shown that they're Alabama steamrolling other teams. So I see them getting better as the week goes on and on. But they'll be tested this weekend, as I'll touch on in a marquee matchup section later. But they're pretty good as well. Ohio State, my team, of course. Offense is the best in the country. Guys in every position, receiving core is the deepest in the nation. So they're constantly showing improvement week to week. And I think if they can just get healthy, then they'll show that they can be the best team in the country. Michigan at number 4. Michigan struggled with Maryland this past weekend, but Maryland was a air raid team led by Tua, who's a quarterback for the Miami Dolphins. His younger brother's quarterback from Maryland. And they exploited Michigan in a couple ways. Hopefully, the Ohio State can use to their advantage down the line. But Michigan's still a great team. Harbaugh has those guys ready to play. Every year they win 10, 11, 12 games. So, for what it's worth, they're a top 5 team to me, even if they are the team up north. Clemson at 5. Clemson, I felt like at the beginning of the year was kind of overhyped. The quarterback DJ for them wasn't as successful as I thought he should have been last year, but I will say that win against Wake Forest this past weekend showed a lot. They competed with Sam Hartman and Wake Forest to the end, got the win in overtime. But Clemson's a pretty good team, and I think they're kind of coming into form, so that could be scary for the ACC and some other teams, and they'll compete with. But so I'm okay with them being at 5 as well. So 6, we got USC. USC's a pretty good team. I just watched them play against, I think it was Oregon State this past weekend. That was a tight game, went down to the wire. Jordan Addison, their top receiver, struggled earlier in that game, kind of came on as of late, but college football is college football. You on the road, conference games, you take the wins as you can get them. So USC is pretty good, and I think they'll be fine moving on. Kentucky is the team that I want everybody to watch when it comes to college football right now, man. They have some pretty good talent across their team. Will Levis is their quarterback. They went into Florida a couple weeks ago and beat them, and when I watched that game, I'm kind of like, okay, this team is going to be legit. So Kentucky's pretty good. They'll be tested this weekend as well. They have a big game this weekend. Tennessee just beat Florida at home this past weekend. Pretty good team. Offensively, defensively balanced. I like Tennessee overall, so they're pretty good at 8. Oklahoma State is a team that's, even though Jim Knowles came to us from Oklahoma State and other coaches left, they've still been able to reload and still be successful. So I'm surprised that they're in the top 10, but I think rightfully so. They've been playing pretty good ball this year. And last, we got NC State. NC State, I went to see them play ECU actually the beginning of this season, and they didn't live up to that number 13. I think they were 13th at the time in the country. But since then, they've improved on offense and defense and just been able to play and win games that they need to. But they'll also be tested this weekend as well. But the AP Top 10, in my opinion, is not an issue this week. Some of the rankings I would move here or there, and you're going to see in my next section with the top 5 teams where I display. But for the most part, to me, these are the 10 best teams in the country. Order can always be argued in the sports and everything, but I think they got the teams right this week. So that's the AP Week 5 top 5 poll, and from there we move on to some marquee matchups this weekend. So for my top 5 within this AP poll, it's going to look a little different, but teams obviously remain the same. But this is just my order. So at number 5, I have Clemson. I touched on them a little bit already, but I think Clemson's coming into form. Some of those guys are in new spots, new positions and things like that. Experience isn't really there, but they're kind of getting it together, and they're led by DJ at quarterback. So I think eventually they'll be able to get it together and be able to make a run. So I'll keep them at 5. 4, I got Michigan. Pretty good team defensively, offensively. Got a 2-headed monster quarterback. Those guys are I would say they're pretty good for the 4th spot. And depending on how they play, they got a big game this weekend as well. So depending on how they play this weekend, we'll see how they move or stay the same in that AP top 5, my top 5 at least. So you got 5 Clemson, 4 Michigan, 3 we got Alabama. Why do I have Alabama at number 3? So I dropped Alabama after that Texas game because simply I feel like if Quinn Ewers would have played the starting quarterback for Texas, then they would have won the game. And also the backup quarterback who came in, I can't remember his name, but he actually got hurt during the game and was on one leg. Ankle was pretty, I think he sprained his ankle and was just playing on one foot pretty much the whole game. So I think if those injuries weren't there, I do think that Alabama would have lost. And injuries are part of sports, I understand that, but the eye test is a thing. And if I see that, teams are struggling with guys who aren't really, backups and things of that nature, then I have to take that into consideration when I'm ranking teams who don't do the same thing. So I have Alabama at 3. In that SEC schedule, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they lose a game here or there in the next couple weeks. But and if they win them, obviously I'll move them back up. But as of right now, I just feel like they're the 3rd best team in the country. We got Georgia at number 2. Kirby Smart, as I mentioned earlier. I think that first game against Oregon is when they kind of shocked everybody and proved that they were the number 1 team in the country. But since then, it's kind of been inconsistencies on both sides of the ball. Some errors that they shouldn't have made that they've been making, special teams mistakes, fumbles, turnovers, things of that nature. So against teams that really aren't as caliber of top teams that other teams are playing. So I would have to knock Georgia down to number 2, and that's what I did in my AP top poll. And at number 1, I have Ohio State. I know that's my favorite team, so most people feel like, oh, he's been biased, whatever. No, I'm not. Ohio State has beaten the number 5 ranked team, Notre Dame, who I know lost to Marshall, and after that, they competed with Carolina and different teams, so I get it. But at the time, they were top 5 team. No other team played top 5 teams in week 1, which is hard to do. You don't have any experience, you don't have any tape on anything of that year, so you basically just going off of what you did in camp. So to win a top 5 game week 1, you have to give Ohio State credit. I don't think they got the right credit for that. Since then, they played some teams. Toledo was a top 5 defense at the time. Were giving up minimum yards, touchdowns, things of that nature, and they blitzed them. So they beat teams like that as well. And then this past weekend, they beat Wisconsin. Wisconsin came into the game with 1 loss, but was a very stingy defense, offensively led by a running back who's one of the best in the country, and they pretty much shut them down. I think it was 45-7 before they start putting the subs in, and then they start running up. I think final score was 45-21, something like that, 52-21. I can't remember, but Ohio State has shown to me that they can beat teams, with of all calibers, top 5, top defenses, whatever you want to call it. They've shown that they can beat them, and this is the craziest part. Ohio State has been doing this without their top receiver. That's been the thing for me. Like arguably the best offensive player in the country, Jackson Smith-Njigba, is a receiver. He's been dealing with a hamstring injury, and somehow, some way, they've still been able to find ways to win. So I have Ohio State at number 1. So call me crazy, but I still think that will week to week show, and we'll see how it goes. But that's my top 5. Out of the top 5 that they had, I have Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, Michigan, and Clemson. So for my top 5, we're going to swing it to some of these games of the week so y'all can see what's coming up. So I have 3 games of the week this week that I will be paying close attention to, and I think as if a college football sports fan didn't know what was going on, or any games, or any sports fan wants to just get in tune with some college football, these are some good games to pay attention to this weekend. First game on the schedule, I have number 7 Kentucky going to number 14 Ole Miss. This is going to be a crazy SEC game. As we know, the SEC is the hardest conference to win in college football, and teams of the nature of Ole Miss, Kentucky, Florida, teams like that are now starting to be able to challenge those Alabamas and Georgias at the top of the SEC. So Kentucky and Ole Miss will be a pretty good game. You got Will Levis leading Kentucky. As I said earlier, when they went into Florida and beat Florida at Florida in the Swamp, that showed me everything I need to know about Kentucky. And I've seen since then they've been able to win and pretty much stay as a top team. So that will be a good test. And they're going to Ole Miss. And if anybody doesn't know anything about SEC games on the road, it's hard to win, real hard to win. But Ole Miss has a two-headed attack at running back with Judkins and Zach Evans. Those are 2 pretty good prospects at running back and two-headed monster. I think Judkins has around close to 500 yards on the ground. Evans is right behind him, around 400. So those guys are combined for almost 1,000 yards in a couple weeks. So they're pretty much putting it in the ground. And getting to it. So that's going to be exciting to see if Kentucky can actually slow them down and if Ole Miss can actually slow down Kentucky's offense as well. So that'll be a good game to see. That's the first matchup. Secondly, we have number 2 Alabama at number 20 Arkansas. Bryce Young, Will Anderson, Jermaine Burton, just a few names of Alabama's top players are always going to be under the microscope for games like this. Big time games, bring out the big players. So hopefully those guys show up and show out on that stage. But Arkansas has a little bit to prove. They just lost to Texas A&M this past weekend. They were a top 10 team too before this loss. Obviously they fell to number 20, but SEC on the road, it's always competition, always hard to win, and it's going to be good to see, if they can actually pull it off. KJ Jefferson is pretty good. Raheem Sanders is also good on Arkansas's team. So these are guys who are impact players and can have success against Alabama and will them to a win, but the question is always going to be, are they going to show up? When you play Alabama, your margin of error is very minimal. And I do think this Alabama's offense isn't as explosive as it's usually been. Usually, they got NFL receivers every year, top guys, and they have some prospects this year, mostly on the defensive end, but led by Bryce Young. I mean, you can't really count them out. Heisman winner, and he's in a running for a back-to-back one, so that should be a good game to see as well. And then lastly, I got a North Carolina, South Carolina game. NC State and Clemson. Number 10 NC State going to number 5 Clemson. It's going to be a pretty good game, man. Both teams undefeated, 2 top 10 teams. I can't remember the last time. I don't even think since I've been alive, Clemson and NC State has ever been in 2 top 10 teams in football. So that's a first, and that should be a pretty good game. I think Clemson, obviously coming off that emotional win at Wake Forest, is always going to be amped. It's going to be lit in the Valley where they're playing, and NC State, for them to go on the road and win, they're going to have to play now about a perfect game. Not going to be able to turn the ball over. Going to have to be able to get some stops and get that offense off the field. But Leary and I think Thomas, one of NC State's top receivers, is going to be a pretty good option this week. Special teams, watch him as well, kick return, punt return, things like that. But if they can make some big plays down the field and kind of loosen up that crowd down in Clemson, then they should probably, hopefully, be able to make the game competitive and possibly win. It's college football, too, at the end of the day. So just because the team is ranked higher or they have a better roster doesn't mean they always win. So that's my third game to actually pay attention to. And those are 3 matchups this weekend, man, that should be pretty exciting. And just like that, episode 3 of Jake Sports Take is a wrap. Today we've talked about the AP Top 25 poll for Week 5. I've given you my top 5 college football teams as of right now. And we've also touched on some marquee matchups for this Saturday with some impact players as well. So looking forward to this college football week. Man, it's going to be exciting. A lot of big games on. So I'm going to be flipping back and forth trying to follow everything. But those are some games, some teams and stuff to pay attention to for fans and things of that nature. So we'll see how it goes. But the next episode will be dropping soon. Trying to stay in the football frame of mind, but the NBA is ramping up. Preseason is about to take off. I've seen some of the NBA teams having their media days. Celtics, Lakers, Hawks, Sixers. A lot of teams are starting to do their media days. So let you know the season's right around the corner, man. So the next video probably touch on some of those things. Could be touching on some football things. We shall see. But until next time, pay attention to the first couple of videos. Like, comment, subscribe, and we'll be back soon. Peace.